A breakthrough for scientists after they had a 20-minute conversation with a humpback whale.
For millennia, humans have gazed upon the ocean with a mixture of wonder and ignorance. We've heard the songs of whales echoing through the depths, yet we've never truly understood what those creatures were saying. That silence, that fundamental gap between observation and comprehension, has finally begun to close. And what we're discovering is far stranger, far more sophisticated, and far more humbling than anyone anticipated. In 2024, researchers from Project SETI, the Cetacean Translation Initiative, announced a discovery that would reshape our understanding of animal communication. Site index equals 11-1. Using artificial intelligence and machine learning, they proposed for the first time the sperm whale phonetic alphabet, revealing that sperm whale communication has both contextual and combinatorial structure not previously observed in whale communication. /site. But here's what catches most people off guard. The whales weren't trying to tell us something simple. They're not sending basic survival signals or mating calls. Instead, site index equals 10-1. Sperm whales use rhythmic sequences of clicks called codas that form a kind of phonetic alphabet, a rich system of sounds the researchers liken to a form of Morse code, where whales can combine codas depending on context and tweak them through rhythm, tempo, expressive changes in timing, and by adding additional clicks. /site. This isn't just about translation. This is about recognizing that intelligence and sophistication in communication were never unique to humans. We simply lack the tools and patience to listen properly. To understand why this moment matters so much, we need to rewind nearly 5 decades. In the late 1960s, a marine biologist named Roger Payne made a recording that would change everything. Site index equals 4-1. Payne discovered that whales sing to one another, and his recordings called Songs of the Humpback Whale sparked the Save the Whales movement, one of the most successful conservation initiatives in history, leading to the Marine Mammal Protection Act and saving several whale populations from extinction. /site. But here's the curious thing. Even with Payne's groundbreaking work, we remained fundamentally ignorant about what whales were actually communicating. We heard the beauty of their songs. We didn't grasp their meaning. For the next 50 years, scientists approached whale communication like archaeologists examining ancient ruins. They recorded the sounds. They cataloged them. They made educated guesses. But the sheer volume of data, the countless clicks, whistles, and songs, overwhelmed human analysis. A researcher might spend months studying a few hours of recordings, identifying patterns by ear, making connections based on intuition and experience. It was meticulous work, but it was also fundamentally limited. The human brain, as remarkable as it is, simply cannot process the complexity and scale of whale vocalizations the way machines can. The question wasn't whether whales had language. By the early 2000s, most marine biologists accepted that cetaceans used sophisticated communication systems. The question was, what could we actually learn about the structure, the grammar, the meaning beneath those clicks and whistles? How could we move from cataloging sounds to understanding language? That question hung in the air, unanswered, until the convergence of 2 technological revolutions began in earnest around 2019. The first revolution came from artificial intelligence. Machine learning models had become sophisticated enough to find patterns in massive datasets that would be invisible to human analysis. The second came from miniaturized recording technology and robotics. Scientists could finally deploy autonomous systems that could record whale communications with unprecedented precision, non-invasively, and at scale. Site index equals 4-1. In 2020, Project SETI formed as a 501c3 nonprofit organization with catalyst funding from the TED Audacious Prize. /site. The project brought together an unconventional alliance. Site index equals 5-1. Marine biologists, artificial intelligence researchers, roboticists, theoretical computer scientists, and linguists. /site. The vision was audacious. Instead of trying to translate whale language with the Rosetta Stone, a parallel text in both whale and human languages, they would use unsupervised machine learning. The AI wouldn't be told what to look for. Instead, it would analyze vast datasets of whale vocalizations and find patterns on its own, the way a child learns language by listening and immersion. Site index equals 8-1. Project SETI's base is on the island of Dominica, where recordings are being collected through custom-built passive bioacoustic arrays covering a 20 by 20 kilometer area where whale families reside, collecting over 30 terabytes per month. In conjunction with robotic acoustic and video tags on the whales, underwater gliders, and aerial drones, /site. The scale was revolutionary. While previous researchers might have collected hours or days of whale recordings, Project SETI was accumulating millions of individual vocalizations. This massive dataset became the foundation for training machine learning models to recognize patterns that decades of human analysis had missed. In May 2024, the first major breakthrough came. Site index equals 12-1. Researchers identified 156 distinct codas, each with its own rubato, ornamentation, tempo, and rhythm, suggesting that when combined, these codas could add up to something akin to syllables, words, or even sentences, /site. But the terminology here is crucial, and where the surprise emerges. When researchers say phonetic alphabet, they're not using metaphor. Site index equals 13-1. MIT researchers discovered that sperm whales use a much richer set of sounds than previously known, with director Daniela Russ explaining that the phonetic alphabet makes it possible to systematically explain the observed variability in the coda structure. It's possible that this is the first instance outside of human language where communication provides an example of the linguistic concept of duality of patterning, individually meaningless elements that can be combined to form larger meaningful units, sort of like combining syllables into words. /site. Let's break down what scientists discovered about the system. Rhythm and tempo. Different whales produce codas with varying rhythms, the relative timing between clicks, and different tempos, the overall duration of a coda. These aren't random variations. They're meaningful variations in a structured system. Rubato. This term, borrowed from music, describes how whales modulate their tempo across consecutive codas in an exchange. A whale might speed up, slow down, or maintain an irregular tempo within what sounds to us like a simple burst of clicks. Ornamentation. Just as a musical phrase can be embellished with flourishes, whale codas can include extra clicks added at the beginning or end, creating variations on the basic structure. Formant variations. Even more recently, researchers discovered something even more surprising. Site index equals 16-1. Whale clicks have structured spectral properties that fall into one of two discrete categories, one or two formants, are orthogonal to the traditional coda-type distinctions, recur across individual sperm whales, and are most likely actively controlled by the whales, with researchers referring to one-formant codas as acoda vowels and two-formant codas as icoda vowels. /site. In other words, whales have vowel-like sounds. They have a phonological system. Here's where the discovery becomes truly unexpected, and where it deviates most starkly from what scientists hypothesized. For decades, researchers assumed that if whales had language, it would be relatively simple and direct. Maybe they had calls for danger, calls for socializing, calls for feeding, a basic repertoire of functional signals. This assumption made sense from an evolutionary perspective. Simpler systems are easier to evolve and maintain. Site index equals 18-1. Instead, the patterns the AI found weren't tied to simple actions, but to social context. Whales communicate in ways that are complex and sometimes personal, reflecting their closeness to one another as well as their social lives. It was less of a simple code and more of a conversation. /site. The truly astonishing discovery was that site index equals 20-1. The whale's communication system shows the potential to overcome internalized gender biases in conservation research, as research has shown that male whales do not sing louder or more intense than females. /site. This fundamental equality in the system suggests a sophistication that researchers hadn't anticipated. But there's more. Site index equals 10-1. Different whale families use distinct dialects to identify themselves. The AI could tell which family was talking just by the subtle differences in their speech patterns, meaning that the language wasn't just a universal code for all sperm whales, but a unique and dynamic living part of their culture, passed down through generations. /site. A single word in whale language can have multiple meanings, depending on the rhythm and context of the conversation and the specific dialect being used. This is sophisticated linguistics. This is culture. This is what we see in human language families around the world. Here's where the story takes a turn towards something darker, more complex, more morally fraught. Because now that we've learned to listen to whales, the question becomes, should we try to speak back? Site index equals 4-1. Project SETI was formed with the vision to understand sperm whales on a level never achieved before, with the ultimate goal perhaps even to talk back. /site this ambition, while scientifically thrilling, opens doors to consequences we're not fully prepared to handle. The ethical concerns are multifaceted. Site index equals 21-1. Conservationists warn that unscrupulous wildlife tour operators could misuse playback technology to draw animals toward tourist groups, causing undue stress or behavioral disruption. Additionally, we may subconsciously expect animals to communicate in human-like ways and express human values once we equip them with translators. If their real messages do not conform to our expectations, there is a danger that humans will dismiss or override them. /site. Even well-intentioned interventions raise concerns. Site index equals 21-1. Using AI to decode whale calls to steer whales away from ship lanes for their own safety raises ethical concerns. While we might prevent collisions, we are still unilaterally altering whale behavior. Scientists must be cautious of a paternalistic mindset wherein humans assume we know what is best for animals and override their agency. /site. There's also the question of anthropomorphism. Will we project our own values and communication styles onto whale language, fundamentally misunderstanding what they're trying to say? Will we interpret whale communication through the lens of human emotion and intention, when whales might be operating on entirely different principles? Site index equals 22-1. The ethical challenges identified include anthropomorphism, privacy rights, cultural and emotional harm to whales, technological solutionism, ineffectiveness for whale conservation, and gender bias. Researchers have concluded that while using AI to decode whale vocalizations holds many benefits for whale conservation, using AI to try to speak with whales is ethically problematic because of the potential emotional, physical, and cultural harm caused to whales. /site. But here's where the story pivots toward hope and possibility. Because understanding whale language doesn't just change marine biology. It fundamentally changes the argument for whale protection. Site index equals 3-1. In a paper published in the journal Ecology Law Quarterly, Project SETI founder David Gruber and his co-authors argue that SETI's work could dramatically strengthen legal protections for non-human life, including the most powerful safeguard of all, rights. /site. This is an abstract theorizing. Site index equals 23-1, a landmark 2024 treaty among indigenous peoples from New Zealand and the Cook Islands, known as the He Wakapu Tenga Moana Declaration, recognizes whales as legal persons with specific rights. For Maori leaders, that declaration isn't a radical new concept, but a continuation of ancestral responsibility, a reaffirmation that whales have always had their own place and agency. /site. When we can show that whales have culture, dialects, family bonds expressed through sophisticated language, the moral argument for their protection becomes immeasurably stronger. It's no longer about preserving a species. It's about respecting a society. The implications of Project SETI's work extend far beyond marine biology and whale conservation. They touch on fundamental questions about intelligence, consciousness, and our place in the universe. For one thing, this research challenges the idea that human language is unique. Site index equals 13-1. The discovery shows this is possibly the first instance outside of human language where a communication system provides an example of duality of patterning, a linguistic property previously thought unique to humans. /site. But perhaps most intriguingly, Project SETI's work has direct implications for one of humanity's oldest dreams, contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. The project's name itself is a deliberate reference. Site index equals 7-1. Project SETI's name, Cetacean Translation Initiative, is a reference to SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. /site. This isn't accidental. The algorithms and approaches developed to decode whale language could be applied to signals from space if we ever encounter them. Consider the parallel. SETI scientists are searching for signals from civilizations completely unlike us, using radio frequencies and mathematical patterns. If such signals arrived, we need methods to decode something fundamentally foreign to human communication. We now have a blueprint for exactly that kind of problem. We've done it with whales. The methods used: unsupervised machine learning, pattern recognition without prior assumptions about meaning, decoding through context analysis, are universal. They work whether we're listening to whales or scanning for cosmic radio signals. What comes next is still uncertain, and perhaps appropriately so. Site index equals 2-1. The SETI team leaders and researchers continue to take great strides towards their mission to listen to and translate whale communication, with recently announced plans to expand their research to other whale species, like orcas, and refine their AI with new algorithms as part of a global movement where scientists are using AI to study animal communication. Site. There's also the tantalizing possibility of two-way communication. Site index equals 24-1. Both David Gruber and behavioral biologist Brenda McCowan of UC Davis hope that understanding whale vocalizations will spark additional public empathy and drive efforts to protect them from human threats such as underwater noise pollution, ship strikes, entanglements in fishing gear, and continued whaling in some parts of the world. Site. Researchers are developing systems that could potentially produce whale sounds that whales recognize as meaningful. This isn't about teaching whales English or implanting human concepts into their minds. It's about using their own language, their own phonetic system, to initiate what might be called a conversation. The risks are real. The rewards could be incalculable. We live in a moment of transition. For most of human history, we've seen ourselves as the sole possessors of true language, true culture, true intelligence. We've built our ethical frameworks around this assumption. We've justified our dominion over other species with it. Site index equals 24-1. Roger Payne wrote before his death, "Just imagine what would be possible if we understood what animals are saying to each other, what occupies their thoughts, what they love, fear, desire, avoid, hate, are intrigued by, and treasure." Site. That imagination is no longer pure speculation. It's becoming measurable, analyzable, real. The whales were never simple. We were simply deaf. Now, with the aid of artificial intelligence, we're finally learning to listen. And what we're hearing is a call, not for help, not for mercy, but for recognition. Recognition that they are not resources, not data points, not curiosities. They are minds. They are cultures. They are societies with their own values, their own ways of speaking, their own place in the world. The decoding of whale language isn't just a scientific breakthrough. It's a mirror held up to humanity. It reveals that complexity, intelligence, and culture existed all around us. We simply didn't have the humility or the technology to acknowledge it. The question now isn't whether we can speak with whales. The question is, what will we do when we finally can? What responsibility comes with that knowledge? What does it mean to share a planet with another intelligent species that has been trying to tell us something all along? These are the real discoveries hidden within Project SETI's phonetic alphabet. And they're only the beginning.